On the slab today, it's the BenQ EL2870 28-inch 4K gaming monitor. BenQ, I don't know how this is pronounced. This is a 3840 by 2160 4K FreeSync monitor. FreeSync, yes, 4K, 28 inches. Now, no matter what monitor you end up buying, there are several questions that you have to ask when you're buying a monitor. Any monitor that you might buy. Now, the first question you should ask about any monitor you are buying is, what type of panel is this? What panel is in this LCD? In this case, it's twisted pneumatic, or TN. It's twisted like me. No, I don't know. This type of panel is typically not great for color accuracy, but it is insanely fast for LCD panels. The twisted pneumatic is pretty much the fastest type of panel that you can get. So there's trade-offs. And for what it's worth, as I've watched the evolution of twisted pneumatic from the beginning of time, pretty much, this panel's color quality is much better to the eye, especially than earlier versions of the twisted pneumatic, like earlier generations of twisted pneumatic. But fortunately, we don't have to trust my eyeball. We've got a meter for it. It's a Spider, Spider Pro colorimeter, but we use this open source colorimeter software, which works pretty well. And so we did our testing with our color accuracy meter thingy, and we found out that actually out of the box, this panel is really well calibrated. Now, some TN panels that we reviewed are all over the place, which you can kind of rectify if you do use a color meter to try to sort of bring it back in line. But with this one, BenQ has gone above and beyond to make sure that it's actually pretty good out of the box. I was surprised because, TN panels usually not that great. So our meter reports 100% sRGB coverage. Yes, 100% sRGB coverage, and about 72% NTSC coverage. So 72% NTSC coverage, 100% sRGB. To be honest, I was kind of impressed with that for a TN panel. I mean, that's actually very, very good for a twisted pneumatic panel. The next question that you have to ask about any LCD panel is, how fast is this panel? And that answer is complicated because it relates to the type of panel. And so you expect a TN panel to be 1 millisecond, to be insanely fast. I mean, that's the whole point, right? But it's not necessarily always the case that it's 1 millisecond. So the advertised speed on this panel is 1 millisecond. But for example, the Samsung U28D590D is also advertised as 1 millisecond. Now that panel has the distinction of being the worst LCD that I have ever reviewed, and it advertises a 1 millisecond response time. And so for the Samsung spec, this is wrong and a lie. So for testing this, we can use UFO testing and a high-speed footage camera to see that the response time is actually very good on this panel. The black to white response time here is actually insanely fast. It's like super twitch shooter fast. This is one of the best 60 hertz results that we've ever had. Only one square is displayed at a time. It is indeed very, very fast. But keep in mind, 60 hertz is about 16 milliseconds. So the square can go from completely on to completely off in 1/60th of a second. So I wish you could OC it so that you could see, 100 hertz or 144 hertz. Usually that's what you see on a twisted pneumatic panel. But with DisplayPort 1.2, which is what's hooked up here with our Vega 64, this is a Sapphire Nitro Plus Vega 64, so DisplayPort 1.2, 60 hertz, 4K is all you get. Now, one other thing that you might ask is, or other features is what's the backlight like? Well, this is LED edge lit, and so you would expect some backlight bleed. So here's a dark shot. You can see some blooming, and you can see that the darks are not really super dark. And if you look really closely, you can see sort of like red and blue blooming, and this is about what you should expect for this type of panel. And unless you're using this monitor in a totally dark room with very dark scenes, I really wouldn't expect this to be a negative. And in fact, this monitor has an ambient light sensor, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a minute, to help lower the backlight brightness to diminish the return. I mean, being a TN panel, you're gonna see some color shift as well. And that brings us to viewing angles. So what's the viewing angles like? Well, again, TN panel, as you move the camera or as you look from side to side, the colors are gonna shift because twisted pneumatic. The best viewing angle for this monitor is with your eye line a little bit above the center of the monitor, sort of looking directly on. Another factor, how fast is the panel in terms of input lag? How long does it take from the time the computer starts displaying the thing, or sending the frame, to the monitor actually displaying it. So like the frame arrives at the monitor, how long does it take? Well, according to our instrumentation, it takes about 3.5 milliseconds from the time the frame arrives at the display till it starts displaying it, which is actually very, very good. So what about inputs or other features? Well, this display does have a DisplayPort 1.4 input and 2 HDMI 2.0 inputs. And there's kind of a fly in the honey here though that I hinted at just a second ago. And that is, it's FreeSync and it's 4K, but the FreeSync is capped at 60 Hertz. Now that makes sense for DisplayPort 1.2 because in general, DisplayPort 1.2 is capped at 60 Hertz 4K. Even though this display is DisplayPort 1.4, DisplayPort 1.4 is not really quite ready for the prime time yet. Now, you can run at a lower resolution, but I didn't have any luck overclocking this monitor at say 1440p to get it to run at 100 Hertz for 1440p. It is possible that you could have a firmware update or something like that in the future, but in terms of like just set it for 1440p, you're still capped at 60 Hertz. So that's maybe a little bit not something that gamers would look for because, you know, not 100 Hertz, 144 Hertz. It's not realistic to expect that on 4K at DisplayPort 1.2, but maybe it is for DisplayPort 1.4, but you know, Vega 1.2, 1.4, I don't know. In terms of packing, the monitor was well packed and shipped in the box, lots of foam, worked really well. So that's another plus, I think, for this particular display. Now, I mentioned this display features a light sensor and a low blue light filter. So there is some software processing options that you have in the on-screen display. It's called Brightness Intelligence Plus. And the blue light filter is maybe something that's added really cool. A lot of people do the blue light filter thing in software. Well, you can do that directly in the monitor via software. So overall, my opinion on this is a good budget gaming monitor. It's got a 3-year warranty, which is a big plus, and it's cheaper than most other 28-inch 4K monitors on the market. I do like that it has a minimalistic design. It's sort of a two-tone black shiny plastic and matte gray. It also supports HDR, which I almost wasn't gonna mention, but the HDR actually does work reasonably well. It's honestly not truly HDR, but keep in mind that true HDR really, as I've seen it, where it only works really well, is on crazy expensive monitors. Like for example, the Dell UP2718Q. That's a much more expensive monitor than this. So overall, BenQ has done a great job balancing features on this monitor. I mean, it's got a lot of the must-haves that you would want with a 28K gaming 4K panel, because 4K. And this display is a good deal for what it is. The only thing that I wish is that you could run it at a higher refresh rate at lower resolutions. I'm gonna keep playing with a custom resolution utility. Maybe I can unlock some sort of magic or secret sauce to get it to run at 95 Hertz or 100 Hertz at 1440p. Also, I've got those new 20 series NVIDIA graphics cards. This is FreeSync, so FreeSync is not gonna work on a 20 series card, but I do know that the 20 series cards have DisplayPort 1.4 inputs. So maybe I can mix and match that. Maybe we'll have a higher refresh rate. Now officially, the BenQ supported refresh rate 60 Hertz. So, but more than 60 Hertz on 4K, DisplayPort 1.2, maybe it's not reasonable to expect that. I don't know. Overall, otherwise, this monitor is really impressive. I don't know that I would, even with the good color accuracy, I don't know that I would use it for photo editing. But honestly, if you want something that's more gaming than professional and an insanely fast 28-inch monitor, this is something that's really impressive. Oh, and it does have a standard 100mm VESA mount, and the stand mechanism is pretty cool too. In the box, there's a power cord and an HDMI cord. I think I would have rather had DisplayPort, but I know why they included HDMI, it makes sense. A lot of laptops have HDMI, so overall, very impressive piece of kit. I'm Wendell, I'm signing out, and you can find me in the Level 1 forums.